Good afternoon. I'm Rev Dave Thompson, and I'm really excited to bring you back to our Civil Human Bible study. You may recall yesterday we didn't actually have an episode. We were on location in San Francisco and actually found a really great place to shoot, but then we were attacked by bees, which I'll include in that as the intro for the show. I'm actually going to put it out tomorrow on Saturday. And it's really, it was a meaningful episode for me, especially talking about celibacy and marriage and divorce. So it was really kind of the closer to that series that we just finished. Today we're taking a little bit different turn. Today we're having and being introduced to children in Jesus's life and Jesus's ministry, talking about them as a moral example for us to follow sometimes as adults, even as a good example of the way that we should be in some regards. So let's go ahead and jump into the passage. It's Matthew chapter 19, verses 13 through 15. Starting with verse 13. Then little children were brought to him that he might put his hands on them and pray. But the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." And he laid his hands on them and departed from there. Pretty simple passage, actually. But in regards to its impact on not only his disciples, but on his teachings in general, it's a pretty weighty statement. I want to talk a little bit about why that is. When we look at this ancient culture, much like our culture today, we have the same paradigms in many ways. The people who feel that they are great or powerful are powerful because of their power over others or their significant wealth, and they think that that makes them and gives them status. In this passage, Jesus really flips that pyramid and points out that to be part of this kingdom of God, this universal rules of humanity, that we need to become like children. So let's go ahead and jump through the passage. I want to talk a little bit about the culture and the language to give us a better understanding of what would have been understood by those who were reading this text 2,000 years ago and the people who were there in the story listening. So the first thing I want to talk about is just the first verse, right? So we have a bunch of people bringing their children to Jesus. As you can imagine, there's not really a whole lot of things for children to do back then. They had their chores and they had some work to do and they were being educated in whatever way that they could be done. But compared to today and today's entertainment industry for children, night and day. So to have somebody who was a significant figure, who was considered to be somebody of great power and somebody of great influence, and was also considered to be somebody of the common folk. He was not, he didn't put on airs, he didn't distance himself from the sick or the poor. People loved that about him, and they should. And so they brought their children to him. And like any parent who wants to, give their their kid a leg up in society and life, they tried to get their kids over to Jesus, and so probably shooed them over there. So you can imagine this huge group of kids running and rushing the stage, right? Well, there's not a stage. He's probably sitting on a rock or something in the wilderness in the middle of the city. But these children are coming after him. And then it says that he placed his hands on him. And obviously in our day and age today, this is a bit of a red herring. I'll try to stay on task. These children are in a society where there's affection shown and where people are able to lay hands on a child and to be able to express physical affection as well and physical kindness and love. That's becoming something difficult in our society today. And I don't want to harp too much on that, but I think we might want to take notice as a society to think about what could be damaging to our culture if we remove all affection or all public displays of touching. That's something that's been affected these days a little bit. And I don't want to harp on that, so I'm going to get back to the point. These children are probably the age 8 years old. The word that's used here to describe them, it's not just a child, just the baseline word. It's actually young child or child in training. And the way that it worked in this culture at this time was that The mothers were largely responsible for rearing the children up to age 8 to 10, somewhere in there. And then, as you know, when they come into an adulthood, which for them was when they hit puberty, that they would be given a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, though that was, I think, maybe introduced a little bit later for women. Nonetheless, the children would be turned into adults, and they would be considered adults by people. And as such, they would be given work like an adult. They would be thought of as somebody who was able to function in the adult world. So they would teach them the trades, they would teach them more things about war and about self-defense, those types of things. But until that point, really the mother has control over it. So socially, she's the one who's in charge of their education and their development and their training. This is important. And because if you read through some of the Old Testament in the scriptures here, they oftentimes will talk about the mother teaching the young children. It's because she was largely the one who was responsible for education. And so these children were probably of that training age. They weren't quite at adulthood, so they were impressionable. And that's the key thing here. That's the whole point that Jesus is going to tie back into it. So we get to the second part, and that is the disciples come back and rebuke him, or rebuke the children, which is really, seems a bit unkind and brutish, but, their mind is thinking about, we need to keep on target here, Jesus. Let's not do entertainment value. Let's do healing and preaching and teaching and discussing the Pharisees and our political issues of the day. Jesus is taking a break, and he rebukes them and says, no, let these kids come to me. This is what's important. They need to be able to be permitted to come to me also, because this is really the way that the people who function best in the world, in this kingdom of heaven, as he puts it, but essentially he's talking about the kingdom of the universe or the heavens out there that we can't define or know. And so he's talking about these general morals and how we as people should live in that. And just to clarify, I'm a civil human minister. And so what that means in this conversation and in these scriptures, I'm looking for those universal teachings, to bring those out and to help apply them across the board, because I think that these teachings in these scriptures, many of them are completely transferable. And I believe that Jesus didn't see himself as a particular religious figure, but saw himself as somebody talking about what is good human behavior and what good society and good people do to remain good and happy. So jumping back into the situation, so Jesus closes on his comments of the children and says, for such is the kingdom of heaven. What does he mean there? Because are we supposed to be childish? Are we supposed to just be ignorant of things? Should we just blindly accept what our parents say, and so therefore our pastors or whatever teacher comes through? God forbid, really. I mean, I don't have to point out the numbers of people out there who are teaching things that were completely contrary to Jesus' teaching. So what is Jesus talking about here? He's referring back to that I mentioned before, the trainability and impressionability of these children. They are in a place of training. They have no other perspective or worldview or construct. They are impressionable and in a place where they're willing to think about the big and simple questions of life. What is love? What is life? What is death? Why are we here? What's humanity for? Why am I here? And what's my responsibility in this human experience? Those are the big questions that Jesus wants his disciples to be, and those students and other human beings to think about. I think a lot of times, and not just in our religious context, but also in our social and political context, we have leaders who are so concerned with their power, who are so concerned with social influence when it comes to being able to sway people, who are so concerned about having money and great wealth and hoarding obscene amounts of wealth, because it makes them feel powerful and it gives them the ability to do things that will force others to come in to do what they want. That's not what makes happiness in our world. In our world, being able to be teachable is absolutely fundamental to our being able to become a better person. Lord knows that I have to continually be in a teachable position, as my spouse would attest to you, and my good friends. Even right now, I'm actually starting in an anger management book, which, we're actually, a few of us friends and my spouse are getting together to walk through. So I have to consider how I can become a better person, which means I need to become impressionable. I need to set aside the modes and models and paradigms and structures that I've been taught and consider the foundations. Is it appropriate to be angry? What does that look like? What do I do when I get cortisol and adrenaline coursing through my veins because some person cut me off on the highway? The whole point of this, and this is where I want to bring it back to, we oftentimes get so hung up on the details, on the laws, and on what are specific issues, but we forget to ask the big questions. We forget to come back to the foundations. If there's anything that I want to move forward with in my ministry and my contribution even to humanity, is to have us think about those foundations. Why are we here? What morals do we all agree to follow? What things do we agree to disagree on? How do we live in this world where we have no more space to go to create a new society? What do we do when all of the people around us have worldviews that are different from us? These are fundamental questions that we unfortunately have to ask, and it is difficult. Becoming a child means letting go of a feeling of power, of a feeling of strength, and being vulnerable. But we need to do that. If we don't, we will continue to clash because our worldviews are incompatible in many ways. But there's commonality. Every single one of us as a human have common things that we share as needs. The need to believe our own faith. The need to not be controlled by others. The need to vote for those who will control us. The need to intimately love, like we've been talking about in this marriage series. And the need to live our life and live our lifestyle the way we want to. I want to thank you so much for being a part of this study. And as I've gone through this, I was just talking with a good friend about this, that it has really jarred my worldviews and my thoughts and made me reconsider how I approach the foundations of who I am and how I approach this world and how I engage and look for relationship and intimacy in my life and love. I hope that you'll do the same. It's a difficult thing to do, absolutely. But find people around you who are also interested in changing themselves, who are interested in becoming better people. They will be the ones that will make you a better person too. Again, thank you for joining me. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Monday. And until that time, noon, weekdays live, I want to make sure that you know that I love you. I do. And I hope you choose to love yourself. That is the only love that we really have any control over in this world. Now I invite you to join me as we go about the rest of our weekend and our day, loving our neighbors the same way. Thank you.